Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first E.DSO Project in the Spotlight event. The topic of today's webinar in this very first edition is the DSO at the center of the data exchange. And first of all, a warm welcome, of course, to the projects who have agreed to participate, and also to our speakers, but also to all of you who are not involved in any of the projects, but has decided to spend your morning with us and listen to what we are doing regarding data in the DSO sphere in these very central projects. Very curious also to hear your feedback, so I hope that after the event you will answer to a short survey that will pop up automatically when you sign out, and we're very curious to hear which other topics you would like to see in the future, because this is of course an event that is very much born by the circumstances that we currently have with the pandemic, that doesn't allow us to meet in person and have the exchanges that we know from many big events across Europe during spring, fall and summer. So instead we have decided to launch this initiative also because we truly believe in it, so that Horizon 2020 and the new coming Horizon Europe is one of the keys for the energy transition. It's absolutely central for the innovation in the grids. And innovation in the grids, well, that is basically our name in E.DSO. And we are very committed to the interaction of all of the learnings that we have from these various projects. And that's basically why we're here today. And we hope that you will enjoy very much this webinar. Without any further ado, I will pass. Okay, sorry, the housekeeping rules exactly before I pass the floor. So speakers and panelists will be able to speak, and participants, they can ask questions through the Q&A tool that you should be able to see in the bottom of your screen. I'm sure that many of you are very familiar with Zoom already and know very well how to operate this. The moderator of the panel session will be able to select your questions and ask them to the speakers. You can also raise the hand and use the chat with the other participants. In any case, I would like now to pass the floor to Mindo, who will give the welcome address on behalf of E.DSO.
Hello, dear participants. I see on the list there is more than 120 participants, so it's a great pleasure for me to have an opportunity to talk to you and to make some kind of introduction or to share my views. And it's really very important initiatives we are discussing here, and very important projects. And I truly believe that after some years, these topics will be very important and big part of our usual daily activities. And the whole society in nowadays and related ecosystems are in some synthetic interrelation, and everything becomes more and more virtual, and we are in the virtual meeting, and year by year remains less areas untouched by these unavoidable trends. And as in every transformation, there are positive and negative effects. Negative, I mean, related with the challenges we face. And also additional disclaimers, there are additional aspects. Energy sector and DSO business is also in a transformation. And I wouldn't go into the specialities, and I wouldn't pretend to look like a wizard in this area. So I have no magic pills also. But there are several things which are important from my point of view. Clients, customers, consumers, prosumers, partners are the final and ultimate beneficiaries of what we are doing. So what is our value proposition and how this meets clients' expectations? Our usual business model some years ago was more related with reliability and infrastructure, only with reliability of networks, infrastructure, and some services. And additionally to that, it is becoming and will be related after some years, or in nowadays even, with the new value added, with the flexibility, interoperability, data, artificial intelligence, RPAs, self-services, aggregators, and etc. And the most important thing is that all of these things must be real, not some kind of science fiction. So we are in the process, and DSOs, we are in the process of this transformation, and DSOs play critical role. We are in the central, and we are playing central role enabling the transition, ensuring the interoperability, linking systems, enabling customers and market players, stakeholders, third parties, prosumers, virtual prosumers, aggregators, flexi, balancing services providers, all of these stakeholders, all of the new species, they will come to the playing ground, to the market. And this is not only standalone service, it is related to data, reading of data, validation, storage, data exchange, data access, communication technology, cybersecurity, compliance, GDPR. So related with data governance and management, with sound data governance and sound management. And at the same time, we must be open, data-driven, reliable. Our value proposition should be based on single standard, from my point of view, ensuring cybersecurity and ensuring simplicity and interoperability. And our language must be related to data. So these projects, Interconnect, Platone, and EUniversal, deals with different aspects of data management and complement each other's work to the benefit of distribution grid innovation. So, not taking all of your time, I would give the floor to the projects in order to present and to discuss. So thank you for listening, and for all of us, wish very good discussion and webinar.
Thank you very much, Mindaugas. And I should also say that Mindaugas started to show up in E.DSO around the same time as I also came. But it's a fact that we have seen a lot, because E.DSO, as most of the members of E.DSO, are very committed to the innovation in the grids and also to sharing their knowledge with all of what they are doing. So thank you very much also for joining us today. Before we get to the project, I want to give the floor to Remark and Stifard, that if you are working on innovation of the grids, you surely know who it is. It's a person who works a lot and is very accessible, and definitely puts to shame anyone who would say that the European Commission is only centered around itself. It's always very keen to meet stakeholders, and definitely we have a feeling of being colleagues with the same goal, which is exactly working on the energy transition. Mark, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kirsten. Thank you very much, Mindaugas, and thank you very much, E.DSO, for organizing this this event. I think this is this really shows, as you say in the title, how DSOs are at the center of the innovations in data, but also just at the center of the energy transition that we are all in. So my name is Mark van Stifard. I'm the deputy head of unit in DG Energy, in the unit that since the beginning of the year is responsible for research, innovation, competitiveness, and digitalization. So obviously what we're discussing here today is a key topic for us. I will not take much of your time, because I think there are many interesting presentations and discussions waiting for us. But maybe allow me to highlight 3 points just at the beginning of the discussion. So first of all, first point is that, of course, the energy agenda, the Green Deal agenda of the European Commission, of the EU as a whole, is very, very charged. We're very busy at the moment preparing the Fit for 55 package, and the Council and the Parliament are hopefully about to agree to the climate law, setting the target, setting the ambition for Europe to be climate neutral by 2050 and reducing the greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030. And I don't think I need to tell you what an enormous challenge that will be. And so the Fit for 55 package that is planned for June or the summer of this year will review what this means for the emission trading schemes, for the effort sharing, for the renewable targets, for energy efficiency, to make sure that our legislation in the different sectors helps us to come to 55% greenhouse gas emission reductions by 2030. And this is, of course, an important increase in ambition. And the discussions we're having at the moment are very much at this level of targets and how can we increase renewables in the transport sector, in the industry sector, etc., etc. But of course, the networks and the way how all of this fits together in the system is as big a challenge. And I think with the clean energy package, we have set the principles of how this is supposed to work. And we have really set in motion a way to organize a market that is fit to integrate all these renewables. And also, if we increase the ambition, we think that, that this is the framework to go by. But of course, there are a lot of demands, so to say, on the energy sector, in particular on the network operators, to also innovate and to develop new solutions to make this work. And there are quite a few things that we ask from, in particular from the network operators, to make the integration of renewables work through flexibility markets, for example. That are things that are also very much still in the phase of development. And so having webinars like this one today is for us also really really important to show the progress that's been made, to share the experience and the best practices across projects. And we are, of course, supporting this, first of all, through Horizon 2020, and I'll get a bit more into that later, but also by making sure that these solutions can be taken up quicker and faster through the way we incentivize the regulators to look at this in the clean energy package, as well as the 10E revision of the proposal that is now being discussed, and where we give much more importance to smart grids and also the role of DSOs. And one last thing that we are preparing for as well, which is something for the end of this year or early next year, is a digitalization of energy action plan. So we're also looking to prepare an action plan where we present how the different actions and policies work together to drive digitalization. And it's clear that the Horizon 2020 work in smart grids is a key part of this. And so we have, I think we've been investing in something like 700 million euro of smart grid projects over the last 7 years on Horizon 2020. So there is an enormous experience. And I think we really moved from testing individual technologies much more into a systemic innovation, and also a digital layer that facilitates that innovation. And so projects like today, Interconnect, Platone, and EUniversal are key for that, because they, as the diagram nicely showed, they address also the different angles of digitalization, going from the way the appliances can communicate with each other and can exchange data, and the way the different actors in the energy system, like the network operators, the suppliers, maybe the car manufacturers, can exchange data, as well as the role of the consumers and the consumer service. So all of these things need to work together, and we need to make data sharing easy. So this is really my second point, through Horizon 2020, through the many projects, and through the BRIDGE General Assembly that took place last week, and where we have different working groups, including one on data management, we are making great progress, I think, in working towards a digital energy system. So last but not least, the last point is really the importance of cooperation across projects. So once again, that's why it's great to be here at this webinar today. Work on things like reference architectures and how we can bring them together. The work that ERCOL has been doing on the harmonized electricity model is key. The work on the minimum viable products. How do we make sure that these different projects and the platforms they test and the data exchange they test can also work together when we talk about scaling up? Because that's, of course, what matters here. The individual pilots are important, but what matters is the ability to scale this up to real-life solutions that can work in a market and that make data exchange, as also Mindauga said, very, very easy. Cyber secure, all these things are important, but we need to make it easy, because we need to make it easy for basically suppliers, consumers to make their flexibility available, because that will bring the cost of the energy transition down. And that is really, really important, because as you know, the levels of investments that are needed to come to 2030 and 2050 are enormous in any way. So, you know, these projects are very important for us as a way to make this work. We're at the same time working on implementing acts on data exchange to also give this a legal backing. We're continuing to support this type of work, like with the OneNet project today that brings many of the different projects together. And then in Horizon Europe, which is supposed to come out, the work program for 2021 and 2022 is supposed to come out in next month, if all goes well. There we will continue to support this data exchange and the cooperation among projects, in particular through support for data exchange, data spaces in energy, and also an interoperability community. So to really solidify all the work in the different projects that has been going on, and support that through the creation of an interoperability community, so that this really helps in creating a European electricity market and a data energy infrastructure. So once again, very happy to be here. Thanks a lot, everybody at E.DSO, for organizing this, and I'm just looking forward to a very interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, and also great words of inspiration indeed for project promoters interested to jump into Horizon Europe very soon. From one semi-colleague to another semi-colleague, I give the floor now to Antonello Monti, who is professor at the Aachen University, and who we're also very happy to work with, as he has dedicated most of his career to investigating and researching and innovating basically in the future of the grids. He has a suitcase full of state-of-the-art projects that are already referenced for many of the projects that we will see later on today. And this is knowledge that he will also coordinate and gather in the new OneNet project promoted by the European Commission as the last big project on TSO, DSO, and consumer relations. The floor is yours, Antonello.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also, I have a very few slides to complete this technical introduction and, let's say, creating a context. In parallel to the project already mentioned, I'm also involved in the project OpenDI, and that's more a collaboration with DigiConnect, obviously also very much involved in the discussion, Rolf Riemenschneider in particular. And so also from that perspective, I like to bring the overall picture so that then introduce the project we discussed today. We heard already from Mark the role of the Green Deal, but we know that as electricity, we are facing a change in a change, which is digitalization, while changing the energy sector. And when I look at the challenge of connected, we identify different parts where we need to be active. And some of them will be obviously discussed also today. One challenge is data models. And I think when we limit the electricity sector, we are doing pretty well. We will hear a lot also today from both, I would say, from all of the projects and how this activity is moving quite well within the electricity sector. We'll also talk about architectures. Here we are still on the progress, but I think particularly as Mark mentioned, in BRIDGE, we are doing a lot in this direction to create a unified European view on architectures and platform architecture. There is work on business models. Also, that is going on. So it's not negative, but we are working on it. For example, I can refer to Platone that will be presented later. Looking a lot at the business model close to the customers is one of the major challenges. Governance is something that still needs a lot of work to be done. And the emerging challenge that we discussed a lot also in Bridge is given by how the digitalization involved the sector coupling. We know the energy transition is not an electricity challenge alone, but the electricity alone cannot make it, and we need to sector coupling to really achieve the target that Mark mentioned. In that respect, oversimplifying the system, we have effort at DSO level. Today, we have efforts also in the coordination in some major projects. Today, we are focusing in here particularly the DSO level with the two projects, Platone, EUniversal. One more looking at the technical aspect of DSO operation, that's Platone, and EUniversal more focus on the market interface. But everything is possible only with a focus on the customers, and I think that's where Interconnect complete the picture. As mentioned, also OneNet is trying to bring all these things together. We started last October, so we are very early in this exercise, but that should create the overall picture that allows the target to be reached. What we have to start, this is a slide taken from the InnoPay, and there are some key building blocks to achieve the full digitalization. Here today, we will be able to touch some of them, not all of them, but it is clear that it's important to have in mind that all those 9 aspects are the critical one to achieve a full digitalization. As a complete last point was mentioned before by Mark, but in Bridge relation to platform, we have been doing a lot of work on using this GAM as reference to a way to describe the architecture and from the different projects and the different exercise in a standardized way. And then the first result that was presented last week is this nice visualization. And so we will see also later that the projects are active, are working using now this as reference so that we have a coherent way to address the challenge. And you see here again, what I mentioned at the beginning, critical is the electricity domain, but also the cross-sector domain is the emerging challenge that we have to take care. With that, I can stop here and now finally give the word to the projects that will introduce their contribution. Thank you very much. And I give you back the floor.
Thank you very much, Anto. And I should also mention that Antonella was one of the promoters of this E.DSO Project Spotlights idea. So we should thank you also for teaching us the idea of these events that will hopefully just be the first of many. Now I give the floor to Brad Bagman from Brown School of Regulation. He is a PhD and a regulatory expert, knows a lot about many of the challenges that the DSOs are currently facing, not least with regard to storage and e-vehicles. And I'm sure that this will give him an excellent platform to stand on in the moderation of the debate we will have now with the Platone project, the EUniversal project, and the Interconnect project. The floor is yours, Brad.
Thank you, Paola. And I think Mindaus, Mark, and Antonello really already set the framework for the discussions that's coming up. I think most of us here in this digital room realize the importance that DSOs would play in the digital technology transformation that the power sector is going through and will continue to go through in the coming years. So without wasting much time, we will go first to the projects. So each project will have 10 minutes to present. We will go in the order of Platone, EUniversal, and then Interconnect. The only constraint from my point is I have to also be the keeper of time. So when you reach about 9 minutes, I will remind you by interrupting you. So my apologies in advance. And then after we have the presentations, we would take some questions from the audience. So please put in your questions in the Q&A. in advance. So with that, I would first go to Ercole De Luca from Platone for their presentation of the project. The floor is yours, Ercole.
Thank you very much, Feduma. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much to E.DSO, giving us the possibility to show what Platone is and what makes Platone different from the other project. And thank you very much to European Commission. European Commission is the ones making everything possible in these projects, not only giving money as it does, but also having giving us people like Mark van Stiput that I want to thank, because he continuously gives to us the support, the commitment to go ahead and to make things better. So thank you, Mark, and thank you, European Commission. My name is Ercole De Luca. I'm from the Areti company, that is the DSO of the city of Rome in Italy. And what I'm going to show you briefly is the Platone project, what does it make and what does it is, let's say, role in the framework that today has been designed, depicted. Next slide, please. As you see, sorry if I will not follow the just the reading the overheads, because you will get the slides, so you can read it alone when you want. I will just want to take this opportunity to show the concepts that are behind the project, behind Platone. We say it Platone instead of Platone. That was the initial name, because Platone is the Italian of the famous philosophist. And because Platone really was really express a philosophy, an ontology, we would say, coming to data concept. The concept of Platone is, of course, enable energy transition, because all 70% of the renewables and flexibility sources will be on the distribution network. But how do we want to enable this energy transition and then match the climate goals that the European Commission gives to us, and everybody of us has to support? We want to do it, as the Italian demo motto is, cutting barriers, enable flexibility. Cutting barriers, because what we have seen in the framework of all the projects is that most of projects are looking how to get better smart grids functioning, including smart grids into the marketplaces, and then get this market and data structure coming up and down smoothly and working. Very good, of course, also Platone does, of course, but the real focus of Platone is to get the last part and the most important part of the framework included in this framework. That is the customers. Customers have to be included. All the customers, from the residential ones from the smaller one to the biggest one, have to be included. And then we have to give them technologies, processes, data management systems, and so on. And we have to provide them in a cheap way, very cheap, very standard, to foster even the external markets for electronics and so on, and of course storage, and of course micro photovoltaics and so on. We have to give them technologies and data systems in order to have them fully included in the cheapest way into the system. This is the focus of the Platone philosophy. Include all the customers. How we do it? We do it with first of all, with the companies that belongs to us. That we have 3 DSOs. That is Areti from Rome, Avacom from Germany, and I don't know, from Greece. That all of you know. We have the technology partners. That is Siemens. That is engineering, and that is Apio. That is a very innovative startup active in IoT and blockchain. And we do with aggregators like Acea Energia. And we do it with universities and research center, like first of all, the Hagen University that coordinates, thanks to Professor Monti, our association, and RSC, that is the Italian National Research Company, and the University of Athens, of course, and TUA. Then we have people looking at the communication, because communicate to people means include people. Explain them the solution provided by Platone Thanks to them, all the people can join the flexibility market. Is very important. That's why we have Baum that takes care of this. And then we have E.DSO. E.DSO means make a uniform and dissemination between all the DSOs, taking into account the needs of DSO and then disseminate these results between all the DSOs. That's what we do. Next slide, please. Here, the concept. This is the concept, main concept of Platone. As you see, we have here in the right down part of the screen, we have the customers. The customer have the storage, the photovoltaic, have the equipment in their home, all the electrical equipment that are in our home. And they have a smart meter. They have something to measure. Then what we do is to link together all this equipment into the houses of the customer, putting together them into a blockchain access layer. Why you say blockchain? Of course, there are several ways to do things, but blockchain at the moment is the one that for us is the most, let's say, effective in certifying measurement that we have from smart meters, certifying the actions that every customer makes at his home, of course, automatically, certifying the set points and the commands coming from DSOs and TSOs asking them for flexibility, certify it, and then get them immediately without any kind of disputation or problem with the bill, giving them immediately the settlement of their actions, so that they immediately see their action, they immediately see the money coming to them according to what they do, and they see the result for the climate of what they're doing. So we are building up this layer, this blockchain access layer, linking together all the customers with the DSO platform. The DSO platform is the core, of course, of DSO actions and management system that takes all this data that are all of them stored in, let's say, what is generally meant as the customer, the flexibility register, what we call the shared customer database, all the certified data for observability, for controllability, for TSOs, for DSOs, for aggregators to make settlement and so on. All of them are certified and stored in the customer data archive that we call shared customer database, and everybody can use this measurement. This means efficiency. This means efficiency. All the stakeholders have all the measurement, everything they need there. Everybody can use it, of course, respecting GDPR, of course, privacy, and so on, and the customer data, and so on. So everybody is respected, but everything is there, very efficient, very cheap. And then you have the market platform, again in blockchain, and this is the unique structure of Platone. We have two blockchain access layers. One that is owned by the DSO, linking together smart meters and people and so on. Putting together all the data coming from there into the shared customer database, we allow all the other market platforms, all the others from other DSOs, from other TSOs and market platform and so on. Everybody can use the data, and still in blockchain, having the financial contracts, transactions of energy, of flexibility, but not only, even peer-to-peer can be certified there and so on. So that in this way, we have this interoperable system when you can put pieces together and then make all DSOs participate to different markets and participating with the other TSOs and exchanging flexibility from the last of the customer, between brackets, last of course, to the first of the TSOs on top of the chain and with all the aggregators. Next slide, please. This is the interoperable architecture of Platone. This is very easy. We try to make it as simple as possible, but it is in concept. In the lower part, you see at the base of all, there is the customer with his smart meter, with his storage, with his photovoltaic, and blah, blah, and everything he does. This is...
Ecole, just to tell you, you have 1 minute more.
Yes, thank you. This, yes, thank you. This system is, as you see, integrating the blockchain access layer. The blockchain access layer linking together gives data to the DSO technical platform based on Sogno platform developed by several other projects, and putting together all the DSO systems like DMS, SCADA, and so on. And then it goes through the blockchain service layer that is the market. Next slide, please. As you see, we do implement the Sargon ontology, where all the cross-sector domain and electricity domain putting together, and we focus it in the harmonized electricity market role model in the top of the business, defining roles and responsibilities and so on. Next slide, please. We do it in 3 demos, one in Italy that implements the fully flexibility market, including all the stakeholders. In Greece, where we do much more focus on the Sonio platform and how the grid can be managed. And in German, where they do use flexibility for local balancing using storage and so on to optimize the local balancing mechanisms for a DSO. Next slide, please. Cutting barriers, unlocks the flexibility is the Italian demo. As we said, the customer in the center, we certify all direction and give immediately the settlement data to all the shareholders to allow to enable the flexibility market. Next slide. The user is in the customer is in the center. He has this on his smartphone the app in blockchain. He sees everything he does. He gets immediately rewarded for his flexibility. And we do it in the last slide, please, in several use cases with all the kind of customers. First of all, the big generation plant of Tor di Valle that belongs to the dispatching market of DSO already now. In the Acea Prinisis with all our electrical vehicle pool site and offices. Do the citizen energy community. We include the citizen energy community for social aspect, people really implementing flexibility in their houses. And the last one in the Enea, that is the National Research Center of Italy, that is a smart building. It's very important because this building is outside of the Areti network, is in the network of e-distribuzione, just to show that this Platone project works for all the DSOs independently where the customer is. I've finished. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ercole. And that was a very interesting presentation of something so complex in 10 minutes. I should just take a minute and say that we should really thank all the speakers for really compressing such big projects into 10-minute time slots. So without wasting more time, we'll now move on to Carlos for the presentation of Universal.
Hello, good morning to all. Thank you, E.DSO, for inviting us. I will now tell you what's specific on this very interesting project I'm coordinating. Our aim is not that technical, as Anto has already said. It's also technical, but focused on this interconnection between the DSO and the market platforms and aggregators in order to help this set of rules, this market to work on behalf of the customer. Our focus is on development of this concept of a universal market enabling interface that focus on interoperability. And I will invite you to watch a short video. Paula, please.
Since the discovery of electricity, our energy consumption patterns have been changing throughout the ages. The rise of distributed renewable energy sources is introducing additional challenges to match energy production and its consumption. That is why EUniversal wants to develop a new approach to make the system more flexible, integrating the fluctuations of the supply-demand curve, meeting a more consumer-centric and sustainable future. Let us introduce the Universal Market Enabling Interface, an EUniversal project. This new and innovative approach aims to ensure interoperability between distribution system operators and new flexibility markets, enabled through the development of universal solutions and real mechanisms for active consumer, prosumer, and energy communities engagement. An active participation in the energy transition must be available for everyone, such as distribution system operators, aggregators, market agents, consumers, or even transmission system operators. For such an ambitious project, a multi-stakeholder international team was gathered. In fact, the EUniversal Consortium brings together 19 partners from 8 different European countries that will contribute with their specific skills. To conceive this interoperable flexibility ecosystem across Europe, EUniversal will take into consideration 3 different layers: flexibility solutions, smart grid solutions, and universal system market interfaces. When all these layers meet and work together, we finally achieve the desired seamless integration, with EUME becoming available to the first tests through an open API. The next step demands testing in a controlled and small environment. The EUME's capabilities will be implemented and tested in 3 multi-scale demos to demonstrate their universality in Germany, Poland, and Portugal. Finally, we can collect all the learnings from the testing stage and elaborate the best practices, making EUME available to anyone across Europe towards a citizen-centric energy system. In this way, an effective, market-based and future-proof ecosystem can be realized, having a universal impact, contributing to the transition to a carbon-neutral society and empowering energy consumers, prosumers, smart cities and energy communities. EUniversal, linking active system management to flexibility markets. To learn more, visit our website or follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram.
Thank you, Paula. You can go to the next one. Next, yes, thank you. So, as the video has explained, we have this 3 vector approach. Next, Paula. So what it's different in this project is, for instance, that we focused on the services that from the point of view of DSO. So the first stage was a recent deliverable 2.1. I invite you all to go to the website and check it, where we find out, while we already knew something, but we are not now sure that a lot of these flexibility services are needed, not just for the transmission side, but the DSO is going to need them, and some of them already we need them. So we designed these services, these new services, from the point of view of the needs of the DSO. Next, please. Also, we have just finished a recent very good deliverable. I think I invite you all again to read it, regarding market mechanisms. Not all market mechanisms are applicable, and so this deliverable 5.1 describes the different options available and what do we, the project and the people who studied, for each of the needs for each of the services. Next, please. Last but not least, we have technologists, companies in the project, and they are also developing a set of tools in order to help the DSO set up this whole scheme and study the integration of the possibilities offered by flexibility into daily operation and planning, also planning. So in the daily operation, including resilient issues, including islanding modes and contingency plans, and in the maintenance planning, starting to include flexibility in the equation and try to delay deferred investments or rise the self-healing capabilities of the network. Next, please. So the solution we're proposing is quite simple. It's not it's just an open API connection between the DSO and the platforms, and eventually with big customers later on. We have 2 market platforms in the project, 1 aggregator, and so we're going to connect with them and show that this can be done with everyone without the need of intermediate platforms. So what we're doing is putting everyone in direct connection, and this DSO in the project is E.DSO, E.ON, and Energa in Poland, but in the end, eventually, it can be any DSO. And the same for the market and aggregator platforms. And so what we're going to do is to study this API solution, publish it publicly. We're going to be accessible to everyone, and it will be a sort of the beginning of our proposal to be a future start of a future standard interface. Next, please. So to accomplish that, as I said, we integrate DSO market platforms and resource aggregators in the project. We will integrate data from smart meters, but of course, the interface will not transport information from the meters. It will not meter information, not this will be done by the DSO, but settings and those items, grid information, some grid information also, very not very hard grid information, not topologies, not. So it will be a simple interface to try to address all this communication that has to be done between the DSO and the market platforms that will act on behalf of the customers. As I said before, this will be done in a distributed way, and we'll prove or try to prove that this will work without the need of a managed platform. Next. And so that's all. We invite you to visit and to, as I said, to read the deliverables. I think they're very informative and very interesting. Thank you very much for your attention, and hope you have a good conversation afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. That was exactly 10 minutes. Perfect.
I know.
So that now that we are on time, maybe we will go quickly to Interconnect. So the floor is yours, David.
Hello, good morning. Hoping that you can hear me well. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation from the E.DSO side for us to present here the Interconnect project. So the Interconnect project is a very large project that, as Anto very nicely put, it's focused on the end user side. So it's on a value chain that also entails with the other projects in which we are looking on ways and contributing to a democratization of the use of energy resources within, of course, the grid, but focusing on ways to make sure that you use interoperable schemas to integrate different stakeholders and different players in a wide diversity. The point is that at the end, we look for demand side flexibility as one of the key points here to steer and to contribute to help the grid operation with the use of these assets that nowadays are becoming more and more part of the flexibility schema. So we are seeing now the integration of storage systems, of electric grids and so forth, alongside with renewable integration, which make a key point here integrating flexibility. And flexibility needs to be used by end users as something that they could valorize in a market-driven perspective. So we need to deploy ICT platforms. We need to deploy also IoT standards capable of dealing with the multiple data exchange. We need to focus on user acceptance. We need to also go through the different marketplaces in which the services can be negotiated, also services concerning, of course, the consumer side, but also, of course, the grid. Finding ways, of course, in the midst of this to increase the share of renewables in a safe and a coherent way within the grid. So what will later be a marketplace for applications and services, it's the focus overall of the project. So in this slide, we wanted to focus on the mission of the grid. So clearly we have a focus on the grid where services and requirements are being mapped now in the project to deal with the grid front. So connectivity is an issue. And at the second stage, architectures and data flows, it's something that we are clearly addressing also as many of the other projects. But here we are tying together two different domains, which is a domain from the grid and the domain from the consumer side. So we need to find different data representations. We need to find strategies to represent assets, systems, and functionalities. And to close the loop, we believe that with services and regulation in a sort of a push-pull approach, we can have ways of supporting what we later on will show, as everyone already mentioned too, ways of providing energy services on the consumption side. Flexibility being one of the most notable ones currently being pushed on. So in the next slide, we can also see how we look at this from the grid perspective, because although Interconnect is a very, very large project, so it involves more than 50 partners, it also focuses on parts related with the grid. So as mentioned from the other colleagues in their presentations, issues related with the grid operation are also entailed here. And basically we're finding ways, as everyone else, of course, on integrating systems in an interoperable way. So whichever is the provider of a service, they can interact with the grid. And this means, of course, as it's been showed here on the second stage, to be able to integrate third parties in the provision of these services, which means on that turn that we need to find ways of setting information exchange between the different parties towards a common goal. And welcome, of course, the integration of newcomers into the business. Aggregators and new roles of retailers is something that we're also focusing on. Hence this specification of use cases that's being laid out in the project. So if we pursue on this front, as in the next slot, we have again this idea of pushing for flexibility as one of the examples of a market-based service that we can study and find ways to bridge the gap between the consumption side and, of course, the grid stakeholders. So to estimate flexibility as we see it later on, to use it in the operation and to have a positive impact, and at the same time find ways of financial leveraging this flexibility are some of the discussions that are currently ongoing in the Interconnect project. And for all of that to work, we need to have realistic supporting data models to create different representations. So we may be discussing here representation from the grid elements, but also the representation of assets and systems provided by third parties to the grids or to the smart grids, which could be, of course, end consumers themselves that can provide ways of having data related to their flexibility usable by grid operation. Of course, that entails other challenges already mentioned by my colleagues earlier on, related with security and privacy. That, of course, it's already at the center of all of these decisions in our project. So in the next slide, we have then what we call a multiple domain articulation. So as it was already highlighted previously, this means that we need to have different stakeholders here operating all together. But at the center and at the interface, we need to create what we've established, a DSO interface to allow different domains to be articulated. And this is really important because this is where we can have the vision from the legacy approach so far and how the next years will determine the integration of new players and newer systems. So we have from the typical side from DSO domain, also an integration with meter and other information that it's currently already assumed to be available to the end consumer. So there are already ways of the consumer reaching out to have information about that, the smart meter data. And the idea is that by using that data, we can leverage on quantification of flexibility and afterwards to find ways of having someone else as a market representative to take that flexibility to the market to create either a joint product or a clusterized product on flexibility. And we have many more approaches that I won't go into detail here, but at the end, whenever we reach out to the home and building domain, we also need to find ways of interacting with other systems, namely those that will be responsible for actually implementing or proxying what will be the actions and the measurements entailed within the flexibility activation. So if we want to use or offer the flexibility of shifting an EV charging, we may do it in a predicted and a reactive way, but we need to have an entity responsible for negotiating with the DSO interface, and then to be able to manage within a building or a home what the flexibility can do and how to use it. So in all, it involves managing energy and orchestrating all the different resources that we have within the different households. So if we move to the next slide, you can see one of the points at hand in our, well, one of the basis for the use cases that we are defining. So we have already published within the project site a set of deliverables, which most of them are public in the project, where we already show the first hint and definition of the use cases in which flexibility is a strong focus on in several of them, involving several domains. And we are a very large project with several demonstrations, as you will see at the end.
I think that David had a connection problem, unfortunately. Hopefully he will be able to connect very soon again.
Yeah, maybe we wait for a minute or so.
Hello?
Oh, okay, David is back. Yeah, perfect.
Sorry, one of the hiccups of home working. So I don't know how far did you listen before it dropped down?
Maybe David, you can start from this slide.
Okay, so regarding flexibility, and apologies again for dropping out, but we are looking at this from different ways. So, and data has a key point here in making sure that we are able to fulfill these different steps for flexibility. So very quickly, we need to look at the registration and pre-qualification of flexibility, who can provide, who can participate, and at which levels of flexibility this can take place. And also to look in ways of having data to quantify the flexibility needs and how the flexibility can be used to actually help in solving problems from the grid side. So local problems are something where flexibility can have a definitely positive point there. How the procurement and trading of flexibility can be done in the different market platforms, how the activation and afterwards the validation and settlement is also done. So all of these are concerns in which we are focused on in the project and clearly point out in ways that involving different stakeholders data is a key point there. So in the next slide, I will just show you how this interoperability approach is being done in the project. So this is a specific case for the grid side. So we need to find ways of creating interoperability, and this interoperability, it's not within the lower level. So we have already a lot of developments on standards on systems like SCADA. They're already using a lot of standardized data exchange based on IEC 61850, and the setting up of different services based also on IEC and SIM representations for the different services that already exist, namely the case of AMI systems with metering and also already analytics, but we're pushing through ways of also having data available within these services to be then used by internal API systems within the DSO that at a certain point, and that's the key message here, need to make sure that they have an adapter that can post this information back and forth in a plane in which all of the other stakeholders can also push information and data, which is where we can actually build up these interoperable services back through. So we're focusing on the domestic side, on the building side, from ontologies that can allow us and help us in representing this, but also from the grid side on other ontologies such as USEF to cover the different domain of the grid, but also with the same idea of having a common representation to facilitate business, to facilitate the integration of new entrants into the market and integrate it. So actually to foster competitiveness that ultimately will benefit both the DSO, the grid side, but also the consumption side. So for the final point in the next slide, just to give you an idea, if we could see the last slide. So this is just the setup of the demonstrators we have. So more information can be reached out from our site. There's just a bit of a hint of what is going on here. Just to highlight two important points here, which is Portugal and France, where we have a strong focus with distribution system operators, in which we will be actually validating some of these approaches to flexibility and actually the integration of this DSO interface, both in Portugal, of course, with the support of EREDS, and also in France with ENEDIS. So this is a demonstration comprehensive of different buildings and different setups, where flexibility will be quantified and provided to allow end users to also cooperate with the grid. And with this slide, I will end. The next one, just posting some information about the project. So if you want to know a bit more about the project, feel free to get in touch with me and also my colleagues in the project. So thank you very much, and apologies again for the interruption. New times.
Thank you, David. I think, and thank you to all three panelists for the introductory presentations. And what we can see is that there are projects which have some common basis, but at the same time, very differing scopes. As has been mentioned earlier, we saw that Platone is more on inclusion of customers in network management. Interconnect is ensuring the interoperability of smart homes and grids and buildings, and then EUniversal is linking active smart management to flexibility of the markets, while the consumer remains at the center. Having said that, I think now we have about 15 minutes for some Q&A, and I would like to first thank Antonello for answering a lot of questions which were short in the Q&A also, where you can see the answers. But I think I can use a bit of my moderator privileges to ask one or two of my own questions, but I will also combine, and we can actually start with David, because there are a few questions here which came up while you were presenting. One of them, which I personally find interesting, is about how will customer exchange data be tested before they start bidding or connecting to the platform. I think with the handling of data, this seems to be very interesting. It is close.
Well, it's if I can, it's multiple fold. So the data exchange and the integration of this ontology is also ensured by partners that create these interactions with their own plants and systems. So on the consumption side, we have a pool of representatives from manufacturer sides. So we have manufacturers from white goods, appliances, EV chargers, and so forth, that will develop these adaptation layers towards a common framework. So they are responsible for implementing, in the case of the buildings, the SAREF ontology. So it's already a reference ontology that describes the different assets and different systems. It's quite flexible, so it doesn't prescribe a single way of implementing a description towards an asset, but it clearly states in a descriptive way how you should do it. And this is quite transparent. This is also applicable even to buildings. In the case, I see a question also from Schneider front. We have also Schneider Portugal participating, and they are also combining their ontologies and use of ontology typically have within buildings, also to be compatible with, for instance, SAREF for building, which is an extension on SAREF. So I would say that this is done also with the support from the DSO front, where other ontologies such as USEF and, well, we've seen already SIM being referred here, are being used to create this interoperability plane in which data is exchanged with a way that you can interpret the data. And that's part of one of the approaches we have, which is semantic reasoning on data, where you can actually learn from the data that it's posted there and not just find a way to define yet a new API. The way you define the API for that, it's part of your business, it's part of your way of operating, but the representation needs to be well perceived and understood by everyone.
May I add something on that,
Yeah, yes, sure, sure, Ercole, please go ahead.
Of course, thanks to David for the excellent explanation of customer data management from a technical point of view. That is important, that is with the Sargon approach, that's what we do. But it's very important to say that data customers, data are of the customers. Customers are the owners of data. So first of all, we have to take care of GDPR, which kind of data we can use. In fact, in Italy, what we do in Platone is first to collect the GDPR assumption of the customer. We do share the data that they want to share, not the others, the only ones that are really needed and not the others, and then go through to the chain. And when you go back, so of course, the Sargon approach, ontology, and so on is helps us to manage it. But the first is the customer is the owner of his data. So first of all, this project and in Platone, we are very careful on that, respect the ownership of data of the customers. On that, we build up all the rest. This is very important. Otherwise, people get scared. What happens to my data? And so on. So this is one I just want to add to the excellent David explanation.
Thank you, Ercole. And moving on a bit from this topic, I think there's a question also from Suzanne, and there's also another one which is about the EU network codes, etc. So maybe I can start with Carlos, but Carlos, what do you see? And then I will come to David and Ercole after also on this question is, what do you see as the role of DSO, and also what is expected of the EU network codes, considering that these are all innovative projects and all projects which are new, which is very different for an industry which has been working in a particular way over the years. So
yeah, so our idea, we've been working together in E.DSO with this issue of the future network code. In fact, it's quite relevant because we have a lot of standardization to do, a lot of discussions to do on what should be regulated or not. Not all should be regulated, and in that issue, what should be regulated at EU level and at national level, and so there's we're building everything, and so in this stage, it's important to set the message to everyone that the DSOs must be a part of this distributed energy resources approach, exploration. And so flexibility is not just, as it was in earlier discussions stressed out, it's not just a transmission issue, it's a DSO issue. And DSO being at the center of this stage, because it connects to everyone. These resources will be connected to us. We also need to explore them and interested in exploring them, and also, of course, are interested in being part of the solution and being the the facilitator of this whole orchestration. So it's very important to have this network code discussion and go forward with it in order to help us and try to integrate the experience in these projects into a set of suggestions that will eventually, in the end, be recommendations from the European Commission.
Ercole, would you like to add something to this?
Yes, Carlos already explained very well the situation where we have to work together with transmission system operator and make together with DSOs. I don't know if new network codes or addition to network codes, but for sure actual network code are not enough to manage flexibility. So we have to do something. Carlos said, I want to add one thing only. Network code means how system operators and so on speak each other in order to fulfill roles and responsibilities. The first, we have to fix roles and responsibilities of DSOs and DSOs. We don't know if at European level or at national level, as Carlos said, but for sure, is needed to define roles and responsibilities. So for us, the first is to start from the harmonized electricity market role model, fixing roles and responsibility, and then build up network code on that roles and that responsibilities.
Thank you, Ercole. Coming to you, David.
Yeah, 2 points. First of all, we had a question here for the dynamic elevation manager, so I've already answered typing there. So this is basically a platform for the communities, energy communities to be formed, so in a dynamic way. So it's actually developed by one of our partners, Vito. You can learn more also jointly with us, so we can share that information. So I think it's Arvind that posed that question. Regarding this data exchange, and as a colleague was mentioning, there's one point here which is data being exchanged back and forth. And there's also a question from Marélie, which is how will this be perceived and used by the end consumer? So we need to find ways of having that information exchanged from the consumption side to third parties that can already been providing some services with the grid because they have volume for that, but for the others they need to proxy with an aggregator or someone else that could represent them. One of the ways we are pursuing in the Interconnect project is design, flexibility, quantification. That's why I've mentioned in my presentation that it's private by design, that you can only share information that can answer your capability of changing your consumption pattern. So you can either change upwards and downwards and provide, let's say, upwards and downwards flexibility. And in that way, you can hide a bit of the information that you don't need exactly to reveal even to your service provider. Of course, that's not a single way to do it, but the approach being private by design in the sense that we can build up a service that doesn't depend on having the actual finer details. If you have an electric vehicle, if you have an electric water heater, or if you have an HVAC system configured this way or another, it's a very sound basis, we believe, to already build up realistic services and business models that leverage flexibility. In this case that we're discussing here for the grid side, of course.
Thank you, David. And I think now we have just about 4 minutes before I have to hand over to Antonello. So before we go, I think I have one last question for the three of you. What do you see in 1 minute? What do you see as one big barrier for replicability and expansion of your particular project? Maybe we can start with Carlos.
Okay, so the main barrier will be the insistence if everyone goes into an idea that there should be a platform for the exchange of flexibility. So what we're trying to prove is that we don't need a managed platform in between DSO and market players. It can be open. It should be open, like other services in the world are. We have apps, and everything is open, and that it's very important to have an ecosystem of different players that can integrate the operation without too much effort and without need to have a referee in between. And so that's the main challenge. We'll try to prove, as I said, that this works, and then it will be up to who decides to go further with it and study further this approach, because it's really open and it's really market driven, and of course in the end it's the customer that will win.
Going next to Ercole, what is the big barrier for Platone?
not for Platone, it's for all the project. The barrier is the missing of standardization of data, standardization of equipment, customer equipment, or the equipment will be standard, communicating standard way, and then the platform and so on. Standardization. That's the main issue. If we go that, we got the barriers.
Thank you. I think that will take 1 more hour to discuss. Coming to you, David, the last one on the list.
Sorry, it was muted. Yeah, one of the challenges right now is actually how we can look at the regulation front and actually in this push-pull initiative, actually unlock some of these services that right now are using data. So in some points, it's a discussion that could take the whole day. How can we leverage the energy and non-energy services? But ultimately, how can we valorize data? It's a bit of an issue, and sometimes we see on the regulation front a bit of a steady pace, of course, but some limitations and still some barriers that need to be overcome. We've talked already about standardization. I think that's the mindset of everyone. There's still to be done there on the technical front, but I believe right now, with the help, of course, of the European Commission, and we have been seeing this from Mark, from other colleagues from the EC, that also this output from the project should help at least in making sure that there's a bit of a push also for the regulation side. So we can find ways of making sure that this new services and business do find the proper support from the regulation side to make them actually feasible into the reality.
Indeed. Thank you so much, David. And indeed, we can now close the discussion. We had a very interesting discussion where we understood a lot more about these projects. I would like to thank first the panelists for your time, and I would like to also thank the participants for being so active and asking so many questions and being here. And thanks to E.DSO for inviting us to host this panel. With that, I would then now hand over the session to the next speaker, Antonello Monti, to wrap up and conclude. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much for managing this session so well in time and everything, been flying very well. And also thank you for all the participants in the chat. I was really busy to answer because there were a lot of very interesting questions. My job here is just to wrap up quickly and give you a little bit of my impression. I was really happy to see, now that the projects are running, that the complementarity that we envisioned at the beginning, looking at the ideas of this project, is really emerging from the presentation. As I had in the beginning said, Platone playing this role of the technical elements of DSO operation, and then as a solution with several interfaces, one interface towards the customers, and that's where the cooperation with the Interconnect makes a lot of sense. And also, if you have noticed the resonance of the standard and data model used mentioned by Platone and mentioned an Interconnect, this is working perfectly in that direction. Platone also has links to the market, and that's where the cooperation with EUniversal is critical to build this overarching picture. And then going back to my original slide at the very beginning, you see how these three projects together shape all the elements from the customer to the DSOs, and then the other project pick up the pictures and build a link to the TSOs to complete the picture. Complete in a coherent way. I'm a coordinator of the project OneNet. And what we have as philosophy there is that we need one network for Europe, which means it's critical, as here we are doing at this level, that the whole operation of the system becomes as integrated as possible and in synergies as possible to be able to manage the complexity of the situation. We cannot imagine a system where, as it is now, a hierarchical structure, but it is a lot of interactions that will make the system possible in the future. Another element that I think emerges from all the discussions We've been talking about standards, and I definitely agree, but there is a process that is even faster than standard, and this is what the projects are doing. So they are creating de facto standards, and this is happening mostly because the philosophy of open source in the open API is prevailing, which means that we break the barrier of closed and monolithic solutions, and we have a universe of interaction of open systems in which Open API and standard data exchange are the elements that allow everybody to talk to everybody. And that's, again, the same point that we'll bring up into the OneNet project, in which we, and many of the people sitting in this discussion are involved also there. It's this multi idea that we have in the OneNet project, which means we want to facilitate all the players to interact with all the players, so that it doesn't have to be anymore the DSO interacting only with the TSO, but they have multiple schema of interaction also across countries as critical element to build this system. I also would like to say that this philosophy and this level of cooperation that we see here, thanks to the work of the European Commission, is putting Europe at the center of this revolution. We are really leading this effort. I had a meeting this week where together some representative of the European Commission, but also representative of DOE, so the Department of Energy in the US, and of the Canadian Funding Research Agency. And I would say we got from the other part of the world a fantastic feedback on how we are managing this process and how our framework of cooperation is really critical. And again, everything works thanks to this open source approach. And like I mentioned, Hercule in the Platone project, we are using a platform which is totally open source. And now we are cooperating with the Linux Foundation Energy to make it a worldwide open standard, so that every operator in Europe, not only Europe, but in the world, could follow this philosophy of modular architecture for automation, which is in itself a big revolution. Last point I would like to mention, I think has been incredibly interesting to interact with this project. Let me do a little bit of, let me say, advertisement here. Next week, we will have, started from Wednesday and going through the afternoon session, an important forum managed by IEEE, the International Electrotechnical Organization, called Smart Grid for Smart Cities. And about 20 of those European projects that are involved in discussion here will be there with their virtual booth for interaction, so that in one place you will have a way to interact with experts from 20 of projects. Can't remember now going by heart, but I'm sure Interconnect is going to be there, Platone is going to be there, OneNet is going to be there. And so we will have an incredible opportunity to have time, because you can go to their virtual booth, discuss with the people, learn more, and interact, while in parallel there will be important discussion going in the session. And last but not least, I would like to remember that the opening keynote, it will be from Mark from Stifard that you heard already today, and it will bring the overall vision of the European Commission on the upcoming programs and upcoming challenges. With that, I think I mentioned everything I want to mention, and I would like to thank all of you to be still here. We have more than 130 participants towards the end of the workshop, which is a very good sign. This number stays constant, so the interest stayed high. Thank you all. Thank you, E.DSO. They are behind all those three projects, and they're playing a very important role on keeping this project aligned. And I think this workshop is the proof they're doing a great job and things are working.
Thanks a lot, Antonello.
So I'll give it back to you for the closing remark. And I got a request on the chat, and I will reply about the coordinates of the EEE webinar. So I hope to see a lot of you. We just extended the early registration till the end of the week, so that people that get the news today still have time, because we're supposed to close today. We give it 2 more days for people to register, but I will give you the coordinate in the chat right now. Please, Kristen, it's for you.
Thank you, Antonello, and thanks for a very spot-on wrap-up. I apologize a bit for the noise here in the background, but it's unfortunately some of the things we have to live with in this situation. It was a pleasure to have you all here, and like Anto said, it's good to see that so many of you stayed for the entire session. It shows that it was a very timely topic that we picked. It's at least something that preoccupies us a lot in the DSO business. I hope that you will answer to the short survey when you sign out, and maybe you also have some suggestion what you want to discuss with the DSO for the next Projects in the Spotlight webinar. We look forward to see you, and thanks a lot to all the speakers, to Antonello, to Ercole, to Mindaugas, to Carlos, to David, and also to Mark from the Commission for joining us today. We look forward to the next edition and see you hopefully next week for the IEEE.
Oh.
See you. Ciao.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Ciao.